When one of the most famous men on the planet showed up to a celebrity party in Las Vegas, nobody expected what happened next. Shaquille O'Neal, four-time NBA champion, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived, walked up to the front door of a packed, sold-out party. He was dressed perfectly. He was smiling. He was ready for a good night. And the man at the door looked him dead in the eye and told him he wasn't getting in. No apology. No hesitation. Just a clipboard, a velvet rope, and 3 words nobody ever expected to hear, directed at a 7'1" legend worth $400 million. Your name isn't on the list. Now here is where most people would have lost it. Most people would have pulled out their phone and started recording. Most people would have called their lawyer, called their publicist, called somebody. Most people would have made sure that everyone on that sidewalk, everyone watching online, everyone anywhere knew exactly who had just been disrespected and exactly who was going to pay for it. But Shaq didn't do any of that. He took one small step back from the rope. He looked up at the building, and then he smiled. Not the smile of a man who was embarrassed, not the smile of a man who was about to walk away and let it go. Something else entirely. The smile of a man who knows something that nobody else on that sidewalk has figured out yet. Something about that building. Something about that party. Something that was about to change everything for the man standing inside, throwing it. Because what the doorman didn't know, what the security team didn't know, what Derek Fontaine, the host of that party, the man in the white linen suit laughing and dancing and celebrating inside, had absolutely no idea about, was one single fact. One quiet, devastating, completely legal fact that had been sitting there all evening like a key that nobody thought to look for. Shaq pulled out his phone and made one phone call. And the moment that call connected, the entire night shifted in a direction that nobody saw coming. What happened next is one of the most powerful stories you will ever hear about what real success actually looks like. Not the trophies, not the rings, not the highlights, but the kind of success that doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. The kind that simply waits, patient and enormous, for the truth to arrive on its own. Stay with us for the whole video. Because what Shaq did next, and the moment Derek Fontaine walked out that front door and finally understood what he was standing in front of, is something you are not going to forget. It happened on a Friday night in October 2019. The air outside the Meridian Arts Complex on South Main Street in Las Vegas smelled like desert heat and expensive cologne. A line of people stretched around the block. Women in silk dresses, men in tailored suits, all of them buzzing with the particular excitement of people who believe tonight is going to be a night worth remembering. They were there for Derek Fontaine's birthday celebration, the most talked-about private event of the season. A party that had been whispered about in group chats and green rooms for 3 weeks straight. The velvet rope was red. The security team was serious. And right at the front of the line, impossible to miss and impossible to forget, stood a man that the whole world already knew. 7 feet 1 inch, 325 pounds. A custom black suit jacket cut wide across the shoulders in a way that no store in the world could have managed off the rack. His smile was already out. Easy, unhurried. The smile of a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone on earth. Shaquille O'Neal. Big Shaq. 4-time NBA champion. The most dominant center the game had ever seen. A man who had retired from basketball and kept right on winning. In boardrooms, in business deals, on television, in the streets of every city that had ever loved him. He was standing at the velvet rope, just like everyone else. And the man holding the clipboard looked straight up at him, all 7 feet and 1 inch of him, and said the words nobody in that line expected to hear. "I don't see your name on the list." Shaq tilted his head, just a little. The way a mountain tilts when the wind pushes against it, and the mountain decides the wind is not really worth a response. "Check again." That was Terrence Cole standing to Shaq's left. Lean, sharp-eyed, a Newark man born and raised, the kind of friend who carries 2 phones because one is never enough. He had been Shaq's business advisor and closest confidant for years, and he did not raise his voice. But the words landed hard anyway. He said, "Check again." The doorman was a young man named Marcus Webb, 24 years old, new to this job, just following orders from people above him. The way young men do when they are trying not to make mistakes on a night that feels important. He ran his finger down the list one more time, slowly, carefully. Then he looked up. "Sir," Marcus said, "I understand who you are. I do. But if the name isn't on this list, I cannot let anyone through. Those are the rules tonight." Shaq did not argue. He looked at the door. Then he looked at the building behind it, the high windows glowing warm orange from inside, the brick walls freshly restored, the whole place humming with music and money, and 100 people who had gotten in without any trouble at all. Something moved across Shaq's face in that moment. Not anger. Not the embarrassment that a smaller man might have felt standing there in front of cameras and strangers and a velvet rope. Something quieter than both of those things. Something that looked almost like recognition, like a man remembering a fact that nobody around him has thought to ask about yet. He took one small step back from the rope. "Okay," he said. One word. Soft. No argument. No raised voice. No scene. Terrence turned to look at him. "Shaq." "It's fine," Shaq said, and he pulled out his phone. Nobody standing on that sidewalk knew it yet. None of the people in line filming on their phones. None of the security staff watching from the doorway. None of the 300 guests inside lifting their champagne glasses. But everything was about to change. But to understand why what happened next meant so much, why it hit the way it hit, why people who heard the story later felt something shift inside their chest, you first have to go back. You have to go back to Newark, New Jersey. March 6, 1972. Newark was not an easy city. It was a city that handed children hard lessons before they were old enough to ask for them. Poverty was present. Violence was present. The kind of hopelessness that settles into a neighborhood like weather, slow and heavy and difficult to move, was present too. But so was Lucille O'Neill, Shaq's mother, a woman of enormous faith and even more enormous love, who raised her son to understand that the size of your body meant nothing without the size of your character. And then there was Philip Harrison, Shaq's stepfather, a United States Army sergeant who did not know how to be soft about the things that mattered. He moved the family, Newark to Georgia, to Germany and back again, following his military assignments, pulling young Shaq through different schools, different cities, different worlds. It was not always easy, but Philip Harrison gave Shaq something that no basketball court ever could. He gave him a code. Work harder than you think you need to. Stand straighter than the situation requires. And never, not once, not for any reason, let success turn you into someone your mother would not recognize. Shaq grew fast. By high school at Robert G. Cole High School in San Antonio, Texas, he was already a giant among boys. The college scouts came early. The attention came early. And when the Orlando Magic drafted him first overall in 1992, the whole country leaned forward to watch. What followed was one of the greatest careers in the history of professional basketball. 3 straight championships with the Los Angeles Lakers, 2000, 2001, 2002. A 4th ring with the Miami Heat in 2006. 3 Finals MVP awards. An Olympic gold medal. A place in the Basketball Hall of Fame that no one on earth could argue with. But here is the part the highlight reels always skip. While other athletes spent their money on things that evaporated, Shaq built. He earned a bachelor's degree in business from LSU. He earned an MBA. In 2012, he walked across a stage at Barry University in Miami and accepted a doctoral degree in education. Dr. Shaquille O'Neal. He invested in Google before it went public. He got into Ring, the doorbell camera company, before Amazon purchased it for over $1 billion. He opened car washes. He bought Krispy Kreme and Papa John's franchises. He became a minority owner of the Sacramento Kings. And quietly, without press releases, without fanfare, he began buying real estate, commercial properties, event spaces, buildings in neighborhoods that the rest of the world had not yet noticed were about to become something. By October 2019, his net worth sat at around $400 million, and he was standing on a sidewalk in Las Vegas, with his name crossed off a list, and he still had not raised his voice. Inside the Meridian Arts Complex, none of that mattered yet. Inside, everything was exactly the way Derek Fontaine had planned it. Derek Fontaine was not a man who left things to chance. He was 38 years old, Miami-born and Miami-built. The kind of city that teaches you early that image is currency and momentum is everything. He had spent his 20s grinding through the lower rungs of the music industry, taking meetings nobody else wanted, reading contracts other people skipped, until he had quietly assembled a roster of 3 platinum-selling recording artists who between them had sold millions of albums across the 2010s. He was sharp. He was charming in the deliberate way of someone who had practiced being charming. And he had built a name for himself in entertainment circles as the man who knew how to make a room feel like the most important room in the world. His parties were legendary. Not because of the budgets, though the budgets were serious, but because of the curation. Every guest list was a statement. Every venue was chosen to say something specific. Derek understood that the most powerful thing a party could do was make the people inside it feel chosen. Tonight's event was personal. His lifestyle brand, Luxe by Fontaine, had just closed a 7-figure partnership with a major streaming platform. The biggest deal of his professional life. He had decided that 38, an otherwise ordinary age, deserved to be celebrated like a coronation. He had rented the Meridian Arts Complex for the entire weekend. The venue was everything he wanted. A converted warehouse in the heart of the Las Vegas Arts District, with exposed brick walls that still smelled faintly of history, high ceilings that swallowed sound beautifully, a rooftop terrace that looked out over a neighborhood in the middle of becoming something new. He had hired the caterers himself. He had approved the DJ personally. He had reviewed the lighting plan and the guest list. 300 people drawn from the worlds of music, sport, film, fashion, and social media had been assembled and locked by Derek's own hand. His head of security, a former bouncer named Rico Salazar, had received one instruction that afternoon. Clear and simple, the way Derek always gave instructions when the stakes were high. Short list, no exceptions. I don't care if it's the President of the United States. If the name is not on that paper, they do not come through that door. Rico had nodded. Rico had passed it down to Marcus Webb at the front entrance. Marcus had taken it seriously. More seriously, as it turned out, than anyone inside the party had anticipated. Because what nobody in Derek Fontaine's orbit had thought to ask, not Rico, not the venue coordinator, not the event planner who had spent 6 weeks organizing every detail of this evening, was a question so basic, so foundational, that its absence was almost remarkable. Not who was coming through the door tonight, but who actually owned it. Outside, the line had grown longer. More phones were out now. More eyes were drifting toward the enormous man in the black suit, who was still standing calmly on the sidewalk, still holding his phone, still wearing that same unhurried expression that nobody could quite decode. A few people in line had started whispering to each other. A young woman near the back of the queue had already started a live stream, her phone angled carefully toward Shaq, while she narrated in a hushed, excited voice to whoever was watching. But Shaq was not paying attention to any of that. He was paying attention to Terrence. Terrence Cole had not calmed down. He was pacing a slow, tight circle, 2 steps left, 2 steps right, the way a man paces when he is holding something in that very much wants to come out. His jaw was set. Both phones were in his jacket pocket, but his hand kept drifting toward them, the way a person reaches for something familiar when the world stops making sense. "Do you understand what is happening right now?" Terrence said quietly. He turned his back to the door so only Shaq could hear. "That is Big Shaq. You are Big Shaq. We are standing on a public sidewalk because a 24-year-old with a clipboard decided tonight was the night to follow the rules like his life depended on it." "He was doing his job," Shaq said. "His job," Terrence repeated. The words came out flat, like he was tasting something strange. "Yes." Shaq looked at him steadily. "His job. Same as you do yours. Same as I did mine every night I stepped on a court. You do what you're told until someone above you tells you different. That's not a crime, Terrence." Terrence stared at him for a long moment. Then he exhaled. Long and slow. The exhale of a man who knows he is not going to win this particular conversation. Shaq turned back toward the door. Marcus Webb was still standing at his post, clipboard held with both hands now, eyes forward, trying very hard to look like a person who had not just turned away one of the most famous human beings on the planet. He was doing a decent job of it, but his jaw was tight and his shoulders were sitting somewhere near his ears. Shaq watched him for a moment. Then he stepped forward, just close enough to be heard without the people in line hearing too. "Hey," Shaq said. His voice was low and easy. "You doing all right?" Marcus blinked. Of all the things he had prepared himself for tonight, kindness was not on the list. "Yes, sir," he managed. "Thank you, sir." "Good," Shaq said. "I need you to do something for me. Not as a favor. Just as the person standing between me and that door right now. Can you radio inside and let Derek Fontaine know that Shaquille O'Neal is out here and would appreciate 5 minutes of his time?" Marcus hesitated. Protocol said no. Protocol said the guest list was final, and outside conversations were not his responsibility. But something in the way Shaq asked, not demanding, not threatening, just asking, the way a grown man asks for a reasonable thing, made the protocol feel suddenly very small. "I can try," Marcus said carefully. "That's all I'm asking," Shaq said. Marcus lifted his radio. The message went up the chain, from Marcus to Rico Salazar. And Rico, standing inside near the base of the rooftop stairs, listened to the message come through his earpiece, looked out at the crowd of 300 people enjoying Derek Fontaine's party, and made a decision. He radioed back. "Tell the gentleman we appreciate his patience. Mr. Fontaine is unavailable at this time. The guest list is final for the evening. Marcus lowered his radio. He looked up at Shaq with the expression of a man delivering bad news to someone he has genuinely started to feel sorry for. "Sir," he began. "It's okay," Shaq said, before Marcus could finish, before the apology could fully form. "I heard." He stepped back from the rope. He looked at the building one more time, at the high, warm windows, at the brick, at the new signage above the entrance, clean and modern against the old bones of the wall behind it. Someone had spent real money restoring this place. Someone had looked at a tired, overlooked building in a changing neighborhood and seen exactly what it could become. He smiled, small and private, not for the cameras, not for the line of people watching him, just for himself. Then he looked down at his phone, scrolled past 3 unread messages and a missed call, and stopped at a name in his contacts that had nothing to do with parties or guest lists or velvet ropes. He pressed call. Terrence watched him, watched his face, watched the particular stillness that settled over Shaq when a decision had been made, and the time for hesitation was officially over. "Gerald," Shaq said, when the call connected on the second ring. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I need you to pull up the property file on the Meridian Arts Complex." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Gerald Hicks had been Shaq's property manager for 6 years. He was the kind of man who kept every document alphabetized, every deed scanned and backed up in 2 separate places, every lease agreement memorized down to the expiration date. He did not ask unnecessary questions. He did not panic. He simply processed information and responded to it the way a good engine responds to fuel, efficiently, reliably, without drama. "Give me 90 seconds, Gerald said. Shaq lowered the phone slightly and looked out at the Las Vegas night. The Strip glowed orange and white in the distance, that famous blur of light that never fully darkened, no matter how late it got. He had played in this city. He had walked these streets as a young man, with an NBA contract in his pocket, and the whole world still feeling new. He had come back again and again over the decades, each time with a little more understanding of how cities work. Not just the lights and the crowds and the surface of things, but the structures underneath. The ownership, the investment, the quiet architecture of who actually holds the ground that everyone else is standing on. He had learned that lesson slowly, carefully, through years of listening to people smarter than him about money, through mistakes that cost him and victories that taught him, through late nights reading documents that most athletes his age would have handed to someone else without a second glance. He did not hand things to other people without understanding them first. Not anymore. Terrence stood beside him, both phones now out. His energy shifted from frustration into something more focused. He had seen Shaq make this kind of call before. The calm voice, the specific request, the patience of a man who already knows the answer and is simply gathering the paperwork to prove it. He had learned over the years that when Shaq got quiet like this, not sad quiet, not defeated quiet, but still and deliberate and almost gentle, something was coming. Something that could not be argued with or rushed or made to arrive any faster than it intended to. You simply had to wait for it. "Okay," Gerald said through the phone. "I've got it open." "The Meridian Arts Complex," Shaq said. "South Main Street, Las Vegas. Tell me what it says under ownership." A single beat of silence. Then Gerald said the name of the LLC, and Shaq nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods when the world has just confirmed something he already knew in his bones. "Send me the full packet," he said. "Title certificate, LLC registration, the master lease, everything. "Sending now," Gerald said. "You'll have it in 3 minutes." Shaq ended the call. He put the phone in his jacket pocket and looked up at the building. The warm light was still pressing through those high windows. The music was still moving through the walls. 300 people were still inside, still laughing, still completely unaware that the ground beneath the building they were standing in belonged to the man standing quietly on the sidewalk outside it. Terrence looked at him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Terrence said, very quietly, "Shaq." "I know," Shaq said. "You own this building." "I know that too." Terrence pressed his lips together, looked at the door, looked back. "And you're just standing here." Shaq looked at him with an expression that was almost amused. Almost. The same expression Terrence would think later that a man wears when he has been tested by something small and ordinary and has decided without any difficulty that the test is beneath him. "Where else would I be?" Shaq said. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Gerald's email had arrived. But inside the Meridian Arts Complex, none of that existed yet. Inside, the world was still exactly the way Derek Fontaine had built it, warm and loud and glittering, humming with the particular energy of a room full of people who all believe they are exactly where they are supposed to be. The DJ was deep into his set. The lighting crew had the room shifting between gold and amber. Colors chosen specifically because they made everyone look a little more beautiful than they actually were. The catering staff moved through the crowd with trays of things that were expensive and small. 300 people filled the space comfortably. Athletes, producers, designers, personalities, all of them orbiting Derek Fontaine the way planets orbit something that has convinced itself it is the sun. Derek was in his element. White linen suit, understated jewelry, handshake always ready. He moved through his own party with the practiced ease of a man who had thrown enough of them to know exactly how to work a room without looking like he was working it. He laughed at the right moments. He leaned in close when people spoke, making them feel heard, making them feel important. He was brilliant at this. It was perhaps the thing he was most brilliant at. Rico Salazar had mentioned the situation at the front door about 20 minutes ago. Shaquille O'Neal, no name on the list, turned away, still outside. Derek had laughed then too. "Not on the list, not in the party," he had said, raising his glass. "Doesn't matter who you are." The woman standing beside him at that moment had not laughed. Her name was Vanessa Price. She was an entertainment attorney from Los Angeles, 41 years old, with a reputation in the industry for reading situations faster than most people read menus. She had worked with Derek on 3 separate deals over 4 years: contract negotiations, partnership agreements, licensing disputes. And she had learned in that time that Derek's greatest weakness was the same as his greatest strength. He was supremely confident about everything, always. Sometimes that confidence was earned. Sometimes it was a wall he built so fast he forgot to check what was on the other side of it. "Shaquille O'Neal," she had said carefully when Derek told her. "I run a tight ship, Vanessa." She had looked at her drink. Derek. Shaq is not simply a basketball player. He is one of the most active commercial real estate investors in the country. He has been buying up properties in Nevada for years. She paused, choosing her next words with the precision of someone who charges by the hour. All over Nevada, Derek had waved his hand, the wave of a man who has already moved on. He's got $400 million. He'll find somewhere else to spend his Friday night. Vanessa had said nothing more, but she had not let it go. There was something pulling at the edge of her memory. A conversation, maybe 8 months ago, with a colleague who worked commercial property law in Las Vegas. Something about an LLC. Something about the arts district. She couldn't place the exact details. Not yet. Not in a loud room with a drink in her hand. But the feeling that came with the half-memory was specific and insistent. The feeling that she had heard this building's name before, in a context that had nothing to do with Derek Fontaine. She excused herself quietly, stepped away from the orbit of the party's center, and found a quieter corner near the east wall where the music was slightly less overwhelming. She set her drink down on a high table, opened her phone, started searching. Meanwhile, Derek Fontaine accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing tray, turned to a music executive he had been meaning to speak with all evening, and smiled the smile of a man who had no idea that 3 minutes ago, on the sidewalk outside his party, a certain email had just landed in a certain inbox, an email containing a title certificate, an LLC registration, and a master lease agreement bearing the name of a holding company that Vanessa Price, in her quiet corner across the room, was now 45 seconds away from finding on the Nevada State Business Registry. But outside, Shaq had already found it. He stood with his phone tilted slightly toward the streetlight, reading Gerald's email the way he read every important document. Slowly, completely, without skipping anything. The title certificate first, then the LLC registration, then the master lease. 3 documents, clean, current, unambiguous. Each one bearing the same company name at the top. OPM Realty Ventures, LLC, incorporated in the state of Nevada. March 2017. It was a name that made Shaq smile every single time he saw it. OPM, other people's money. A joke he had made when he named it. A nod to the oldest principle in real estate investing. The idea that the smartest builders in the world have always known how to use leverage, how to make capital work harder than any individual person ever could. He had laughed when his attorney first wrote it on the paperwork. He still laughed now, privately, standing on a Las Vegas sidewalk at 11 o'clock at night. The managing member of OPM Realty Ventures, LLC, listed clearly on the Nevada state filing, was Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal. He had purchased the Meridian Arts Complex in the summer of 2018. He had seen what the Las Vegas Arts District was becoming. The galleries arriving, the restaurants opening, the creative energy of a neighborhood in the middle of reinventing itself. And he had moved quietly through his LLC, acquiring the building before the rest of the market caught up to what it was worth. He had put a property management company in place, let the building operate, and turned his attention to his other ventures. He had not bought it to hold over anyone. He had bought it because he understood value. Because his stepfather had taught him to see things not just as they were, but as they were going to be. Because 20 years of building a business empire had trained him to recognize the moment a neighborhood decides to become something, and to be standing on the right side of that decision before the rest of the world arrives. He forwarded the full email to Terrence without a word. Terrence's phone buzzed. He opened it, read the first document, then the second. His eyes moved faster as he went, the way eyes move when they are processing something that keeps getting bigger the further in they go. Then he looked up. The expression on his face was one Shaq had seen before. Not often, but enough times to recognize it. It was the expression of a man standing at the edge of something enormous, looking down, recalibrating everything he thought he understood about the ground beneath his feet. "Shaq," Terrence said. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. "You own this building." "We've established that," Shaq said pleasantly. "You own the building that the man who just turned you away from his party is currently throwing that party inside of." "We've established that too." Terrence looked at the door, at Marcus Webb, still stationed at the rope, still holding his clipboard with both hands. At the warm light pressing through the high windows. At the line of people still waiting, still filming, still completely unaware of the particular shape that this night was taking. Then he looked back at Shaq. "So what do we do?" Shaq locked his phone screen, slid it into his jacket pocket, straightened up to his full 7 feet and 1 inch. Took one long, slow breath of desert air. His stepfather's voice arrived without being called for. The same words it always brought. The same words Philip Harrison had said in military housing in Germany. In the stands of a high school gym in San Antonio. On a phone call from halfway around the world, when a young Shaq had called him angry about something that now he couldn't even remember. Never beg for a seat at a table you already own. He had not understood it at 12 years old. He understood every syllable of it now. "We get Gerald," he said. Terrence was already dialing before Shaq finished the sentence. Gerald Hicks answered on the first ring this time. Terrence gave him the address, the cross street, and 3 words that Gerald, in 20 years of property management, in 6 years of working specifically within the O'Neill portfolio, had never once been asked to deliver in person on a Friday night. "Bring the originals." Gerald did not ask why. That was the thing about Gerald Hicks that made him indispensable. He understood instinctively the difference between moments that required explanation and moments that simply required action. This was the second kind. He was already reaching for his leather portfolio before Terrence finished talking. The original documents, the title certificate, the LLC registration, the signed master lease, lived in a fireproof filing cabinet in Gerald's home office in Henderson, Nevada, 22 minutes from the Las Vegas Arts District on a quiet Friday night. Gerald made it in 17. He pulled up to the Meridian Arts Complex at 10:47 p.m. in a silver Honda Accord that looked spectacularly ordinary against the lineup of town cars and ride shares depositing glamorously dressed people onto the sidewalk. He was wearing khakis and a pale blue collared shirt, his leather portfolio tucked under his arm, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked like a man who had been pulled from a quiet evening at home, because he had been, and who had not stopped to change because there was no time to stop and change. He walked directly to the front entrance. Marcus Webb saw him coming and assessed him the way a doorman assesses everyone, quickly, instinctively, sorting him into a category. The category Marcus landed on was not party guest, not even close. Gerald stopped at the rope and extended his hand with the calm formality of someone who has introduced himself professionally approximately 10,000 times. "Gerald Hicks," he said, "property manager for OPM Realty Ventures, LLC. I need to speak with whoever signed the venue lease for tonight's event." Marcus stared at him. The clipboard felt suddenly very light in his hands. Almost weightless, the way things feel when they stop mattering. Is something wrong with the building?" Marcus asked carefully. Gerald opened his leather portfolio. He removed a single document. The master lease agreement, crisp and official. The OPM Realty Ventures header sitting at the top of the page like a quiet announcement, and held it at an angle that allowed Marcus to read the top 2 lines without straining. "There is nothing wrong," Gerald said patiently. "This is simply a routine ownership matter that requires a brief conversation with whoever is responsible for tonight's rental." Marcus lifted his radio with a hand that was not entirely steady. The message went to Rico Salazar, and Rico Salazar, standing inside near the base of the rooftop stairs with a drink in one hand and his earpiece in the other, heard the message come through and went very still. He looked across the room at the 300 people laughing and dancing and celebrating inside a building whose owner was currently standing on the sidewalk outside it, patient and enormous, waiting for a conversation that was now, finally, impossible to avoid. He set his drink down on the nearest surface. He walked to the door. Rico Salazar had worked security for 17 years. He had worked nightclubs in Miami, private events in New York, corporate functions in Los Angeles. He had seen arguments at doors, confrontations in hallways, situations that escalated and situations that dissolved. He had a gift for reading rooms, for knowing, before anything happened, which way a night was tilting. This night was tilting in a direction he had not anticipated. He stepped outside and took in the full picture in one long, practiced sweep. Gerald Hicks, small and calm, portfolio open, document extended. Terrence Cole, lean and watchful, both phones now visible, eyes tracking Rico's face for information. Marcus Webb, standing at rigid attention in the way young men stand when they sense that the adults around them are about to have a conversation that will determine whether tonight becomes a story told with pride or a story told as a warning. And Shaq, still there, still standing, still wearing that same expression, unhurried, untroubled, almost peaceful, that Rico now understood was not the patience of a man waiting to be let in. It was the patience of a man who had never needed permission in the first place. Rico took the document from Gerald, read the header, read the LLC name, read the managing member line. His eyes stopped there for a moment, resting on the name the way eyes rest on something that reorders everything around it. He handed the document back. Then he did what Rico Salazar always did when a situation moved beyond the boundaries of his authority. He took out his own phone, opened the Nevada Secretary of State Business Registry, typed in the LLC name, waited 4 seconds for the filing to load. Read it. Looked up at Shaq. Looked back at the building. Something crossed Rico's face that was not quite embarrassment and not quite shock, but lived in the narrow space between them. The particular expression of a professional who has just discovered that the job he was doing and the reality he was operating inside were two completely different things. He pressed his earpiece. "Derek," he said quietly, "I need you at the front door. Right now." Inside the party, across the noise and the music and the golden light, Derek Fontaine felt his earpiece buzz with Rico's voice. He excused himself from the conversation he was having, something about streaming numbers, something about a second partnership deal already forming on the horizon, and moved toward the entrance, champagne glass still in hand, wearing the mild, slightly impatient expression of a man being pulled away from his own celebration for something he expected to be minor. He had no idea what minor looked like anymore. Vanessa Price watched him go from her corner across the room. She had been on her phone for the past 4 minutes. The Nevada Business Registry had loaded. The LLC filing had opened, and the name on the managing member line had confirmed, with the clean, indifferent certainty of a legal document, the thing that had been pulling at the back of her memory all evening. She put her phone in her purse. She set her drink down. She followed Derek toward the door. Derek Fontaine stepped outside at 10:54 p.m. He came through the same door that his staff had closed in front of Shaquille O'Neal less than an hour before. He stepped past Marcus Webb, who had gone so still he looked like part of the architecture. He stepped past Gerald Hicks, who stood quietly to one side with his portfolio closed and his expression neutral, the way a man looks when he already knows how a conversation ends and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. He found Shaq exactly where Shaq had been all along, standing, still. Patient in the way that only people who are completely certain of themselves can be patient, not passive, not defeated, but grounded so deeply in the truth of their own position that the noise of the situation simply could not reach them. The October desert air was cooler now. Somewhere down the block, a car was playing music that drifted over faintly and then disappeared. The line of party guests had thinned, most people already inside, and the few that remained had gone very quiet, sensing without being told that something worth watching was unfolding at the front of the queue. Derek stopped. He was a tall man, 6'2", broad-shouldered, a man who carried himself with the physical confidence of someone who was used to being the most commanding presence in most rooms. But standing in front of Shaquille O'Neal in the open air of a Las Vegas sidewalk, he became something measurably smaller. Not because Shaq loomed over him, though he did. Not because Shaq was looking at him with any hostility, because he was not. But because of what was in Shaq's eyes. Not anger, not triumph, not the gleaming satisfaction of a man about to win an argument. Something far more uncomfortable than any of those things. Something that looked almost like understanding. Like a man who had already forgiven the situation before the situation had finished happening. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Mr. O'Neal," his voice came out controlled, polished. But underneath the polish, if you listened carefully the way Terrence was listening, and the way Vanessa was listening from 3 steps behind Derek's left shoulder, there was something fragile working very hard to hold itself together. "I understand there may have been a miscommunication this evening regarding the guest list. I want to offer you my personal apology." Shaq looked at him. Those dark, steady eyes, unhurried, unperformative, just present. "I appreciate that," Shaq said. 2 seconds of silence. Derek shifted his weight slightly. He had prepared himself for anger, for the viral confrontation, for the attorneys on speakerphone, for the kind of public scene that turns into a headline by morning. He had prepared talking points. He had prepared damage control. He had not prepared for this, for the simple, undefended dignity of a man who required nothing from him. "I was only told," Derek started. "You were told to run a tight ship," Shaq said, gently, without accusation. "That's not a criticism. That's good management. I've told people the same thing myself." Derek blinked. "There was a miscommunication on my side too," Shaq continued. "My assistant and your event coordinator. It happens. I'm not here to make tonight difficult for you." Behind Derek, Vanessa Price exhaled. A long, quiet breath that carried with it the relief of a woman who had been watching a situation approach a cliff and had just seen it choose a different direction. Derek looked at the ground for a brief moment, then back up. "I'd like to welcome you inside," he said, "as my personal guest." He stopped. Something was snagging in his throat. The awareness, fully arrived now and impossible to shake, of the specific detail that reordered every part of this evening. "This is the building is..." "Derek," Shaq said. The name, said simply, landed like a hand on a shoulder. Derek stopped talking. "I didn't come here tonight to make a point," Shaq said. "I came to be around good people and celebrate something worth celebrating. If there's room inside, I'm glad to come in. If the night's too far along, I understand that too." He meant it. That was the part that was hardest for Derek Fontaine to absorb. Standing there on the sidewalk outside his own rented party, inside another man's building. The complete, uncomplicated sincerity of it. No leverage being applied. No moment being savored. Just a man saying a true thing in the open air, and meaning every word of it. Terrence uncrossed his arms. Gerald tucked his portfolio under his elbow. Marcus Webb, at the door, felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the moment he had first looked up from his clipboard and realized who was standing in front of him. Derek Fontaine looked at Shaquille O'Neal for a long, quiet moment. Then he stepped aside from the door. "Please," he said. "Come in." Shaq smiled, wide and easy and completely real. "Thank you," he said, and he walked through the door. The party swallowed him whole. The music, the warmth, the golden light, the 300 people who turned and stared and parted instinctively the way crowds part for someone whose presence rearranges a room without asking permission. Someone started clapping. Then more people. Then the whole room, rippling outward from wherever Shaq stood like a wave that had no choice but to keep moving. He laughed. That big, room-filling laugh that had nothing performed about it. He shook hands and hugged strangers and posed for photographs and accepted a glass of something cold. And within 4 minutes, he was exactly what he had said he came to be. A person at a party, celebrating something worth celebrating, surrounded by people who were glad he was there. Derek Fontaine stood near the entrance for a long moment after Shaq disappeared into the crowd. Vanessa Price stood beside him. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing that needed to be said that the night had not already said more clearly than either of them could have managed. Later, much later. After the music stopped and the lights came up and the catering staff began breaking down the tables in the quiet aftermath of a night that had been many things, Terrence and Shaq sat in the back of a car, moving through the wide, bright sprawl of the Las Vegas Strip. The lights slid past the windows, neon and hotel signs, and the particular glow that this city keeps burning all night long, as if darkness is something it simply refuses to negotiate with. Terrence looked at him. "You knew the whole time," he said. "I knew what I owned," Shaq said. Terrence was quiet for a moment, watching the lights, turning something over. "You could have said it the second Marcus turned you away," he finally said. "You had Gerald on the phone in minutes. You had the documents. You could have walked in there and ended the whole thing before it started." He paused. "Why didn't you?" Shaq looked out the window. He thought about Marcus Webb, 24 years old, new to the job, just following instructions, holding a clipboard like it was something worth protecting. He thought about Rico Salazar, doing exactly the professional thing, the right thing, the thing his employer had asked him to do. He thought about Derek Fontaine stepping outside and finding, instead of the confrontation he had braced himself for, something he clearly had not encountered enough of in the rooms he usually moved through. Simple grace. He thought about Philip Harrison, about base housing in Germany, about the stands of a high school gym in San Antonio, about a voice that had followed him for 50 years into every arena, every boardroom, every sidewalk where someone had underestimated what they were standing in front of. Never beg for a seat at a table you already own. And then the quieter lesson underneath it. The one his stepfather had never said out loud, but had demonstrated every single day of his life. And never make a man feel small for not knowing what you never told him. Because it wasn't his fault, Shaq said simply. None of it was anybody's fault. Terrence looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. Soft at first, rising slowly, until it filled the car the way Shaq's laugh had filled the party. Genuine and warm and impossible to resist. "Man," Terrence said, shaking his head slowly, "you are something else." Shaq looked out at the lights, at the city burning bright against the desert dark, at the world still turning, indifferent and beautiful and full of buildings that belonged to people nobody had thought to ask about. He smiled. And that is the story of the night Shaquille O'Neal stood on a Las Vegas sidewalk, patient and quiet, while the whole world caught up to what he already knew. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Because real power, the kind built over decades of hard work, discipline, and knowing exactly who you are, never needs to announce itself. It just needs to exist. That is a lesson that goes far beyond basketball, far beyond business. It is a lesson about character, about how you carry yourself when the situation tests you, about what you choose to do when nobody would blame you for losing your cool. Shaq passed that test without breaking a sweat. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment down below and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? We have people tuning in from every corner of the globe, and every single comment makes this community a little bigger and a little warmer. If this story moved you, if it taught you something, if it made you want to carry yourself a little differently today, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps more people find stories like this one. And if you believe the world gets better when kindness wins, when patience beats anger, and grace beats pride, then subscribe to this channel. Because that is exactly what we are here for. Every single video. And speaking of that, the next story is already waiting for you. Go ahead and click the video on your screen right now. We will see you there.